You ever get an email that erases you in just 5 lines? I did. Christmas dinner will be small this year. Hope everyone understands. No hi, Rachel. No invitation. Not even a courtesy copy. They thought I was still freelancing, jumping from gig to gig, easy to ignore. What they didn't know? I'm the CEO of the logistics firm controlling the one deal their entire company is chasing. I built it in silence while they deleted me in silence. And if you've ever felt like the quiet one, the afterthought, the one they forget to include, stay with me. Because in just a few minutes, I'll show you how silence became my loudest response, and how you, too, can reclaim your voice without ever raising it. On Christmas morning, they sat at my table, quiet, small, and stunned, signing a contract under my name. The legacy they once used to define themselves? It now lives under my letterhead. If you've ever been quietly erased, don't wait for another holiday to pass you by. Watch this now. Because sometimes, the most powerful comeback isn't loud, it's permanent. Before we dive into the story, if you're enjoying these meaningful stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more. Now, let's start the story together. It took them just 5 lines to pretend I no longer existed. I didn't even flinch. The email came at 7:12 a.m., time-stamped with precision, as if Carrie had drafted it the night before and waited until morning to send it. The subject read, Holiday Dinner Logistics. I knew it was coming. Still, I let it sit there while I stirred my coffee, watching the snow settle gently along the windowsill. Minneapolis wore its December the way a tired woman wears her scarf, tight, practical, and quiet. Eventually, I opened it. Hey all, it began cheerfully. Just a quick note. We're keeping Christmas dinner small this year, tighter space than expected. Hope everyone understands. It was signed Carrie and Brad and included the usual suspects on the CC line: Robert, Ellen, Aunt Jean, Greg. My name was missing, of course. I wasn't shocked. I scrolled back through the email chain about carpooling, dish assignments, who's bringing the wine, and found no trace of myself. A familiar calm wrapped around me. I'd been slipping out of their story for years, not loudly, not in anger, just gradually, like steam fading from a kettle. I stood, stretching my back, and glanced toward the shelf above my desk. The red envelope was still there, nestled between an old paperback and an unused journal. I hadn't opened it since the week I turned 19. Just seeing it reminded me of that odd little note my father once left on my dorm desk, written in his sharp, angular hand, "Quiet girls last longer." I never asked what he meant. Maybe I understood. I walked back to my desk. The apartment was silent aside from the hum of a radiator clicking to life. I liked the silence. It gave me room to think clearly, without the noise of being someone's afterthought. On the desk sat a slim folder stamped with a blue compass logo, North Arrow Logistics. I ran my fingers across the edge, then opened it. Inside was a pitch deck, eastbound freight corridor, Phase 2 proposal. The final slide had been revised just last night. I'd written every line. I'd also signed the letter of intent as managing partner. They still thought I was freelancing, jumping from gig to gig, chasing scraps of design contracts and copywriting jobs. That version of me had been useful to them, easy to ignore, easier to pity. What they didn't know could fill volumes. I returned to the email, hovered my finger over the trackpad, and deleted it without a second thought. It didn't sting. It barely registered. Instead, I opened the proposal. The numbers were sharp. The routes were optimized. And the final page contained a clause, one I'd added quietly, that would decide the future of a deal Robert's firm had been chasing for months. They thought I was still freelancing. They had no idea I held the key to everything they needed. I didn't leave with a bang. I left with a bookmarked spreadsheet and no announcement. The day I trained my replacement, I brought in donuts. Glazed, cinnamon, maple. I watched him, Noah, click around the dashboard I'd built from scratch while nodding along as if he'd been doing this for years. He was 26, just loud enough in meetings, just likable enough in the elevator. Management loved him. I was asked to onboard him with grace. I did. By lunch, I had updated my resume. By dinner, I downloaded a blank spreadsheet and titled it 90-Day Build. No quitting post, no farewell cake, just tabs labeled skills, needs, gaps, and one column that simply read, figure out the real problem. For the next 3 months, I worked freelance gigs like stepping stones. I took odd contracts, cold-called warehouses, shadowed dispatchers at odd hours, and listened more than I spoke. Everyone in logistics complained about inefficiencies, routes lost to bad mapping, delays from outdated APIs, vendor chains that collapsed over one missing form. The pain points weren't sexy, but they were everywhere. One night in 2018, I joined a Slack group for underrepresented founders in logistics and supply chain. That's where I met Jasmine Liu. She didn't talk much in group chats, but when she did, people listened. Jasmine had a mind like water, always cool, but never still. We began trading questions privately. She understood systems the way I understood people. One thread led to a Zoom call. That call led to a shared Google Drive folder, and that folder became the quiet foundation of North Arrow Logistics. We didn't launch with a splash. Instead, we formed a parent LLC with a bland name, Everhill Partners, and used it to acquire 4 small logistics firms that were months away from shutting down. We kept the names, staff, even the fonts. No press, no LinkedIn announcement. Just better processes, cleaner routes, and tighter coordination across counties. The profits trickled in, then surged. By 2020, we had 6 states under contract. I stayed invisible on purpose. No one asked where Rachel Whitmore went after she left Branford and Hunt. No one realized that the woman who used to print color-coded binders now negotiated multi-million-dollar haulage agreements under a name no one connected to me. Once someone in passing told my brother Brad, "You could sell rain to Seattle." Everyone laughed, nodded, and repeated it at family dinners. I always wondered what they said about me. Likely nothing. By the fall of 2022, Jasmine and I were reviewing a short list of potential partnerships. She walked in one afternoon, dropped a thick folder onto the table, and simply said, "Eastbound Freight's looking for a strategic logistics partner." I blinked. Eastbound Freight, one of the arms in Robert's sprawling empire, my father's company, the one Brad had just been promoted to oversee. Of all the companies trying to court us, it had to be theirs. They showed up 30 minutes early. That's how you act when you think you're in control. The boardroom was a glass-walled capsule on the 13th floor of a co-working space in downtown Minneapolis. Minimalist, with a polished walnut table, a carafe of citrus water, and a discreet black camera tucked into the upper corner of the ceiling. That camera fed directly to my laptop where I watched from my apartment, barefoot, coffee in hand, framed by snowfall. Brad wore a navy blazer with no tie. His cousin Nate, tagging along for reasons no one clarified, looked uncomfortable in a suit half a size too big. They shook Jasmine's hand, all confidence and small talk. Brad complimented the view. Nate muttered something about parking. Jasmine smiled, nodded, and gestured toward the table. They assumed she was the decision maker. Brad opened his pitch with the certainty of someone who'd practiced it in front of a mirror. He talked about alignment and vertical integration, used the phrase lean but scalable twice. He referenced Eastbound's legacy, its reach, its family values, which almost made me laugh. I recognized half the phrasing from slides I'd ghostwritten years ago. Jasmine didn't interrupt. She didn't nod too much, didn't fidget. When he was done, she sat back, calm as ever. "That's a strong presentation," she said, "but I don't sign the deals." Brad blinked. "Sorry?" "She does," Jasmine replied, and slid a folder across the table. The logo on the cover was North Arrows, clean lines forming a compass rose. The tab inside was labeled Contract Summary, Eastbound Freight Partnership. Brad opened it. Nate leaned in. Their eyes scanned the page. Rachel Connors, founder and CEO, North Arrow Logistics. Brad's face shifted, just slightly. A freeze, then a flicker of disbelief. His posture stiffened. Nate looked from the page to Jasmine, then back. Jasmine added, "She got your Christmas email, by the way. The one about space being tight." Brad's smile faltered, just a hair. That wasn't personal. "I'm sure it wasn't," Jasmine said, folding her hands. "Still, here we are." On my screen, I could see everything. The way Brad adjusted his cuffs, the way Nate sat perfectly still. No one raised their voice. No one needed to. Quiet girls last longer. My father's old phrase surfaced again, not as a warning, but as prophecy. I was never meant to rise. But here I was, out of sight and entirely in control. Jasmine leaned forward slightly. "You're still welcome to present your offer," she said. "But just so you're aware, she's not looking for partners." A pause. Then, "She's looking to acquire." The room went still. From my apartment, I muted the feed for a moment and let the silence stretch. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that a lineage of small, polite exclusions had just met its reckoning, in a boardroom with citrus water and clean lines where I never said a word. I sent the email with no subject, no greeting, just a time, an address, and 2 words: bring nothing. It was Christmas morning in Minneapolis. Snow blanketed the sidewalks in clean, soundless layers. Inside, my apartment smelled faintly of toasted rye and black coffee. The table was set for 4, simple white plates, cloth napkins folded with care, and a glass carafe at the center catching the morning light. The unopened red envelope sat face up on the coffee table. I had moved it from the shelf 2 nights ago. For years, I told myself it didn't matter. Just another quiet note from a father who preferred instructions over affection. But now it looked different. Not important, just irrelevant. They arrived late. Not by the clock, but by presence. No zipped coats, no voices calling Merry Christmas, no gifts. Just 3 men who weren't sure if they were walking into a meal or a reckoning. Brad entered first. His eyes scanned the room like a stranger, as if he'd forgotten the layout. Nate followed, shoulders hunched, still unsure why he was here. Robert came last, slower than I remembered, but his gaze was the same. Flat, unreadable, quietly calculating. I didn't rise from my chair. I gestured toward the table. "Sit if you're staying." They did. I served eggs, still warm. The bread was crusty, sliced thick. No one spoke. The silence stretched just enough to be noticed, but not enough to fracture. Nate cleared his throat. "So? Is this about business?" I looked at him. "You're here because you forgot I exist, and now you remember." No one contradicted me. I placed a single folder next to the coffee. No binder clips, no tabs. Just one contract. Clean, final, binding. Brad reached for it but hesitated. His fingers curled back. Robert took it instead, scanning the lines in silence. Nate sipped coffee like it might explain something. "You'll get what you want," I said evenly. "The roots, the tech, the oversight." I let the words sit. "But you work under my system. You follow my protocols. And if you ever speak to anyone the way you spoke to me—" I didn't finish. I didn't have to. Brad looked down. Nate stared into his cup. Robert folded the contract and tucked it into his coat pocket without a word. The threat wasn't in my tone. It was in my restraint. Outside, a plow scraped by, slow and clumsy against the silence. I poured myself more coffee and didn't offer refills. They understood. This wasn't a family breakfast. This was a table set for consequence. They didn't argue. They knew I meant it. Not because I raised my voice, but because I never needed to. They used to say I was too quiet to lead. Now their email signatures sit under my letterhead. January in Minneapolis was always sharp, the kind of cold that cut through wool and metal. But inside the legal suite on the 22nd floor, it was warm, carpeted, and soundproofed, like the end of something being put gently to rest. Elena Hart wore navy and gray that day. No loud jewelry, no makeup that begged to be noticed. Just precision. A stack of printed transition memos sat before her, each page already flagged, signed, and time-stamped. Her initials appeared beside every critical directive. Brad's name was listed twice, once to acknowledge his former role, once in the personnel adjustment notice. He used to joke that Elena was too soft to manage even her own schedule, that she hesitated, deferred too much, lacked edge. Now her name headed every strategic rollout across North Arrow's internal system. I didn't speak to him, not at the Christmas breakfast, not at the merge. I didn't need to. Brad and Nate's names had shrunk, visibly, across our shared platforms. Their access was limited, their inboxes redirected. What once were titled executives were now listed contributors. One junior employee caught me in the hallway after a document review. "Why didn't you just shut it down?" she asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. I paused. Because shutting it down would have ended it. Owning it means they live with it. She nodded, unsure whether it was brilliance or cruelty. Maybe both. We didn't hold a rebranding event. No town halls, no inspirational videos, just a quiet message on the intranet at 9:03 a.m. As of January 8th, Eastbound Freight will operate as a division of North Arrow Logistics under unified leadership. Jasmine handled the internal restructuring like she always did. Calm, clear, efficient. No detail missed, no space left ambiguous. By the time the final signature dried on the merger agreement, Eastbound was no longer a legacy. It was a folder, archived, encrypted, and migrated. There was no drama. No camera flashes, just new badges, new logins, and a 3-paragraph email from Elena that ended with, "We move forward now, deliberately." I reread it once, then filed it in a folder marked Closed Wins. A system once built on ignoring me was now mine. Every screen, every badge, every login. Not one of them had to say the words out loud. I saw it in how they looked away, in how small their names had become beside mine. And I didn't smile. Because some victories don't need celebration, just permanence. They never saw me as a threat. That's what made me inevitable. The company town hall was held in a vaulted conference room downtown, where rows of employees filled the chairs in calculated silence. The lights were dimmed. The projection screen glowed faintly, waiting. Jasmine stood near the side wall, her arms folded loosely, unreadable. Elena hovered by the stage steps, calm as ever. In the front row, Brad sat still. No badge, no notepad. Just a man realizing he was now furniture in a building he once claimed as his own. The video began without music, no stock footage, no slogans, just a timeline, plain white text on black slides. 2015, regional routes collapse. 2017, talent overlooked. 2019, expansion fails. 2021, leadership silence. Then a new slide, different in tone. Sometimes the person you ignore is building the ground you stand on. Silence followed. I stepped in then. No podium, no script. Just a gray blazer, dark jeans, and presence. Every head turned, not quickly. Slowly, like gravity had shifted and they were recalibrating their understanding of the room. I didn't smile. I didn't gesture. I only spoke once. "You gave up on me when I had nothing. Now I own everything you built and everything you thought I couldn't." Then came the final slide. Names dissolved, titles vanished. Former partners replaced with logistics associates, salaries adjusted, welcome to the new order. There was no applause, just a room taking inventory of itself. Elena watched the screens like she was flipping a page. Jasmine didn't move. Brad blinked twice, then looked at the floor. I saw Nate farther back, arms crossed, face unreadable. I didn't stay long. I walked off the stage before the lights came back up. A few eyes followed me. Most didn't. That was fine. In the hallway, alone again, I passed the framed mission statement I'd edited months ago but never signed. It didn't need my name to have my imprint. Everything here already carried it. For a brief second, I thought about that red envelope. Not what it said, but how long I'd let it sit unopened. I no longer needed to read it. The only message I carried now was my own. They'd tried to write me out, first with silence, then with space, and finally with exclusion. But this was the ending I authored. I didn't come back to be welcomed. I came back so they'd never rewrite me out again. I didn't need applause. Just knowing they could never erase me again was enough. Sometimes the quiet ones aren't weak. They're simply building where no one thought to look. In families, like in business, it's easy to overlook the ones who never ask for credit. But dignity, once found, doesn't need permission to stand tall. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment or share your own experience. Sometimes that's how healing begins.